Official PlayStation magazine, this is at times a devastating experience. There's no denying that a substantial part of the appeal is masochistic. Jesus Christ. Wow. Dark Souls is a twisted, depraved, unforgiving bundle of death, hopelessness, and despair. Jesus, it's no wonder people didn't want to play this game. Like, that's a 9 out of 10 review, and they're calling it an twisted, depraved, unforgiving bundle of death, hopelessness, and despair. Fucking crap. Well, that sounds like a ton of fun. Let's play that. Right, so I'm going to need you to bear with me here because I know that this entire chapter will be contentious, particularly with people who are most likely to click on this video, given that the majority of you who clicked on a Dark Souls 3 retrospective probably came to hear me talk about how great a game it is. And this video will get there eventually, but I want to come clean and set the context of how I even came to play Dark Souls 3, because I think that'll make for a more interesting video. Also, like, I know I owe you all a Dishonored retrospective after running that Twitter poll. I'm working on it, okay? I got distracted. Welcome to ADHD brain. Oh, and if at any point it sounds like I'm dying, it's because I'm recording this on the hottest day ever. I'm a mess. If I do actually expire, I love you all. And Moody, come delete my internet search history, please.
I wasn't building a bomb! I was just curious.
Lastly, before I get into it, having now written the majority of this script, this video has kind of turned into a bit of a sequel to the Bloodborne retrospective I released in January of this year. I'm not saying you have to watch it before this. I think this video makes its own points and stands on its own, but I'll be referencing both it and the game itself quite regularly throughout this retrospective, like in the very next paragraph. So I was new after beating Bloodborne twice over Christmas and New Year break, and finally getting good at a Soulsborne game, that I'd eventually be back to tackle the Dark Souls trilogy. When I decided to double down on making retrospectives in January, I literally had Dark Souls trilogy written in my massive list of games I wanted to make videos about. I figured I'd make a Dark Souls one in January, a year after the Bloodborne video. But if you've ever been bitten by the Soulsborne bug, and I have to assume that most of the people here know exactly what I'm talking about, these games have a habit of getting under your skin. They call out, like sirens in the night, luring unsuspecting gamers to their destruction with the sweetness of their songs. I had the itch, and I needed to scratch it. So I decided that now was the time to make my Dark Souls retrospective. I waited through 2 sales on the PlayStation Store before just giving up and buying Dark Souls Remastered at full price. I downloaded it on my PS5 and I organised a stream of it. There are a few people in my community who are somehow even more obsessed with From Software games than I am, so I figured we'd all get a kick out of me streaming Dark Souls for them. This would be my 3rd attempt at playing the original Dark Souls and my 5th attempt at playing a game in the series. I played both Dark Souls and Dark Souls 3 when they first came out, but bounced off them pretty quickly. I also tried a Dark Souls 2 demo on EGX once, and bounced off that even harder, probably owing to the pressure of playing it in public and in full view of about 200 hardcore Dark Souls fans, as I struggled with the first 2 skeletons that the demo threw at me. My latest attempt at a Dark Souls wasn't really an attempt. I just needed some footage of the first game for my Bloodborne retrospective and played to just past the Taurus demon boss fight before stopping and going back to editing, never really looking back. I also had 2 failed Bloodborne attempts and 10 personally disappointing hours in Sekiro in 2019. When I played Bloodborne for the first proper time last year, the game clicked for me in a way that none of the other From Software games I'd ever played had clicked. I felt like I finally understood what all the fuss was about. Well, that's not true. I always understood what the fuss was about, but I was always on the outside looking in. Now it felt like I'd been given the keys and welcomed in. It felt amazing. I'd finally, as the kids would say, gotten good. Oh, as the kids would say, joke. Come on, you're better than that, Amy. Just delete that. Delete it. Sitting down to stream Dark Souls, I had it in the back of my mind that I'd need some time to shake off the rust, but that I should be able to get into it within the space of a single stream. That's how it worked with Bloodborne. 1 4-hour stream and 2 bosses later, and I was ready to rip and tear my way through Yharnam. And I'd heard the same story so many times before, that so many people like me had disliked or not gotten into Dark Souls, played Bloodborne, finally got it, and went back and devoured the Souls trilogy. Now it was my turn. So I was really surprised to find that I kinda hated it. Okay, I just deleted several paragraphs of reasons why I found the original Dark Souls to be a frustrating experience. To be honest, I'm not sure my reasons for not vibing with it are particularly important to this video. It just ended up being me complaining for 5 minutes straight, which elongated a chapter of this video that doesn't really need to be the focus of the entire thing. Suffice to say, I played it a bunch, I tried to stick with it, and found that it didn't click with me at all. If you were in the stream, then you'll know how I felt, and I tried to play it a bit more off-stream with the same result. The only thing I will say is that I feel a little bad about dragging the review summaries of Dark Souls in the Bloodborne video now. I still think my original point stands, that there was such an overwhelming focus on the difficulty of the game that many people were put off even trying it when it first came out, and the tone of the review set the standard for how we as a community approach discussing difficulty that still exists to this day, and it's a tone that we need to change. But they also kind of nailed my experience with playing around 8 or 9 hours of Dark Souls. By the time I finally closed the game for the last time, I felt worn out. And that's not how I want to feel playing a game. Even a Soulsborne game. I never felt like that playing Bloodborne, and it wasn't a feeling I particularly wanted to continue. So I wrote off doing a retrospective of Dark Souls and thought about how I was going to approach making a shorter, rambling video about my experience in a way that wouldn't come off as obnoxious. Then, my good friend and podcast co-host Red-Bearded Fox suggested I give Dark Souls 3 a go. Just quickly before I pivot to talking about Dark Souls 3, I need to very quickly slot Dark Souls into my running best games ever list. It's the list I update at the end of each of my retrospective videos or roundtable discussions. It's something I do just for fun, just to keep a running table of all the games I talk about at length. I've put Dark Souls here, and I know that probably pisses you off, but I didn't really vibe with the game despite trying pretty hard, and harder than I do with a lot of other games. But if that does annoy you or you disagree with it, well, first off, it's my list and it's highly subjective, and your opinion is just as valid as mine. But second, I urge you to stick around for the rest of this video, because I took Fox's advice and downloaded Dark Souls 3. And yeah, wow. Dark Souls 3. The discourse around the Dark Souls franchise is a little weird. After sinking around 10 hours into Dark Souls 3, I did a quick Google search to try and start figuring out what the community had said about it, the closing game in the Souls trilogy. I was trying to figure out why I bounced right off of the first game, but had been sucked into the third game almost immediately. So I had some questions. Was it because this was the easiest game in the trilogy, or the hardest? Was it because it was faster paced? Did people consider it the strongest game in the franchise, or the weakest? Was there something else I wasn't considering? It turns out the answer to all of those questions, and more, is yes. Dark Souls discourse can be very confusing. Almost as confusing as trying to figure out how to do the side quests without a guide. Every other forum post or article I found about the series offered conflicting viewpoints. Dark Souls 3 was the best game in the series and the worst. It was the hardest and the easiest. The faster pace was better and worse. The quality of life was an improvement or about the same. The boss fights were more thrilling and easily the best the franchise had to offer, and they were the weakest. Honestly, this discourse was pretty refreshing and a good sign for the entire franchise. A lot of the time, a consensus forms around certain opinions when it comes to popular game and franchises, and though you'll always be able to find outlying points of view about anything, there are generally accepted quote-unquote truths. Not so in the Dark Souls community. Which is awesome, but it didn't really help me nail down what it was about Dark Souls 3 that made me like it so much. Which meant that I'd have to rely on my own thoughts and analytical thinking to figure this one out, so I guess thanks for nothing. As you might imagine, especially if you took a peek at how much time is left on this video, there are a lot of reasons why I love Dark Souls 3, and I fully intend to dive into detail about some of them here. Chapter 6 might surprise you. But I thought it best to start with the big reason why I liked Dark Souls 3 and didn't like Dark Souls. My own personal journey to even playing this game kind of demands that I open my analysis by comparing and contrasting the biggest difference between my experience with the two games. If you were paying attention to the screen during the last chapter transition, you'll already know what I'm going to say, even if it might seem confusing and kind of arbitrary a reason. I figured it out around the 10th time I sent a clip of me getting my ass kicked by something in the game to my friends. It was actually this clip, specifically. Dark Souls 3 is funny, yo. That's it. That's the reason. I mean, it's not the only one, of course, but it's the main reason I was able to fall in love with Dark Souls 3, where Dark Souls 1 kept me at arm's length. When I was playing Dark Souls, whether on stream or off, there were a couple of moments I was playing where I had a laugh at my own expense. Some of them even made it into a Twitch highlights video for June. I can see through you. Why did I roll directly forwards? What's wrong with me? Ah! By and large, I spent most of my time feeling aggravated. Aggravated by the encounters, aggravated by the level design, aggravated by the general setup of the game itself. Most of the time when I failed or something unfortunate happened, it felt like a proper setback, or something I couldn't really avoid, or just the game being a dick. I played Dark Souls 3 completely off-stream, but recorded almost every moment of gameplay. When I was done with a session, if something particularly funny had happened to me, I clipped it out and sent it to some of my gaming friends, and we all had a chuckle at me getting lit up by that dude with the flaming cross, or chucked off a bridge by the wandering demon, or suddenly having to dodge a surprise attack, or suddenly seeing a giant crab Naruto running towards me, or any of the other really funny situations I found myself in. I'm not going to say I never felt frustrated by Dark Souls 3. There were a couple of moments where I was certainly cursing the game, and a couple of parts where I did get stuck for a bit. But by and large, my failures felt like they were either funny or not really that big a deal. Oh god, I just choked on my juice. Oh god, no, why now? I've been betrayed. But that's the key difference. When I was playing Dark Souls, frustration and tiredness were the two main things I was feeling. In Dark Souls 3, once I got over that initial hump of difficulty, I felt very little frustration. If I hit a challenge, I always felt like I could overcome it, or I would make a funny clip to send to my friends, or both. Usually both. Whether I was getting eaten by a mimic after forgetting to check a treasure chest, or killing Aldrich Devourer of Gods in 2 attempts, I was having fun. So I guess what I'm ultimately trying to say is, thank you Foxes for figuring out from a single stream of Dark Souls that I'd have a much easier time vibing with Dark Souls 3. This one feels like much less of a punch in the tits. So I want to start my analysis of Dark Souls 3 by talking about how it onboards new players. I know I'm starting at the beginning, I'm a genius. I talked extensively about this in my Bloodborne video. In fact, I think about a third of the entire retrospective was dedicated to the topic, so I won't go into as much detail in this chapter because I don't want to spend ages repeating myself. Needless to say, I think Bloodborne was an absolute masterclass in onboarding new players to what is a very challenging experience. But Dark Souls 3 also does a really good job with this as well. Dark Souls 3 is pretty explicit with its tutorial area, since, it's an actual tutorial area. After an opening cutscene that name-checks a couple of the bosses you'll be killing and explains how deeply fucked the world is, you create a character and wake up in the Cemetery of Ash. It's here that you're given the opportunity to learn the game's controls and test them out on a few starter enemies, some undead boys with a variety of weapons. There's no real deeper lesson in this relatively short tutorial area. These enemies exist purely for you to practice and get to grips with the basics: moving, dodging, blocking, parrying, and each of the different attack moves. There is a super tough enemy hidden here that you can try and take on if you want, but chances are, unless you're a Dark Souls veteran or just really, really good at video games, you'll get stomped into the next life if you even try and fight it. Personally, I just came back to kill it later. If you find the path to the enemy, there's a note on the ground that tells you to turn back, and when a game like Dark Souls is telling you to turn around and walk away, it's generally a good idea to listen to that advice. Crystal Lizard aside, there's not really too much here that will challenge you. You might die a few times to these starter enemies as you get to grips with the game. Soulsborne games have a very particular style to them, and it can take a hot minute to get used to it. Which is why I really appreciated a quick level to orient myself with how to play, right before you walk smack bang into the first boss of the game, Eudix Gundyr. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Eudix? Iodex? Eudex? I don't know. I'm just going to call him Gundyr from now on. Unlike, say, Central Yharnam and Father Gascoigne, the Cemetery of Ash and Gundyr isn't really a skill check to make sure you have the necessary skills to survive the rest of the game. That comes later. So much as they exist to let you get to learn the controls in a practical environment. The only things Gundyr really teaches you is to expect and be able to adapt to the unexpected, like when he suddenly transforms from this into this. And it's generally a good idea to stay close to and behind your opponent. Seriously. Staying in front of Gundyr gives him license to destroy your entire world. And in his second phase, keeping distance between you and him will see him obliterate you in short order. Mid-range is not your friend. I mean, just look at the size of his head, thing. Once Gundyr is dead, you head on up to the Firelink Shrine, make a bunch of new friends, which I'll get into later, and are promptly directed to the High Wall of Lothric to start your journey to killing the 4 Lords of Cinder in an attempt to maybe, hopefully, save the world from darkness. The deeper lessons start to come into play during the High Wall of Lothric. And beyond, really. Like, all the way beyond. Where I argued that Bloodborne's first area was a microcosm that succinctly taught you every skill you needed to know to successfully progress through the entire rest of the game and putting those learned skills to test in new situations, Dark Souls 3 is a game where you're constantly learning. And as such, I never really felt comfortable at any given point during my time in Lothric. I always felt like I was right on the edge of complete failure. Like I'd only just managed to get through each run between bonfires, or each exploratory excursion, or each boss fight, or each encounter with a brand new enemy by the skin of my teeth. I want to say I enjoyed it, but the truth is I'm struggling to find the right word to actually convey my complicated feelings on how I feel looking back on my Dark Souls 3 experience. Nothing quite seems to fit perfectly. Satisfied? Happy? Melancholy? Maybe a little bit proud? All of these words are part of the way there, and honestly, it's a little embarrassing as an essay writer to be stumped trying to come up with a word to describe something. But one thing I can say unequivocally is that I'm definitely glad I did it. Each new area brings with it a new kind of challenge and an upping of the stakes. Farron Keep sees you managing the poisonous swamp as well as its many enemies. The Crucifixion Forest tests your ability to manage large groups of enemies. The Grand Archives has you navigating a labyrinth of bookshelves and enemies, and so on and so on. While the game has a very steep learning curve when you hit the High Wall of Lothric for the first time, once I mastered dodging, stamina management, and patience, and once I leveled up a few times, something I highly recommend you do during the first area, Dark Souls 3's general difficulty curve is actually really enjoyable. Except for one very notable section. And I think anyone who's played Dark Souls 3 knows exactly which area I'm about to mention. It's the area where the difficulty curve very suddenly and sharply spikes upwards without warning, causing you to run headfirst into it at full speed and give yourself a concussion. Honestly, I'm still not sure how to process the almost game-ruining experience of trying to get through Lothric Castle. After managing to get through the tough but excellent Dancer of the Boreal Valley boss fight first time, not that I'm bragging, I was, as I had been all game, eager to see what the game had for me next. As soon as I got to the top of the ladder that descends into the boss arena, I started to seriously question my life decisions. And after an hour in Lothric Castle, I started to wonder how badly I really wanted to see Dark Souls 3 through to the end. I figured, after everything I had accomplished up until that point, that I was prepared for anything. That was before the difficulty of Lothric Castle came crashing down on me like a mountain. I'd hit difficult challenges before, and would do so again, but Lothric Castle is on another level entirely. The first thing you have to do is simply to navigate through your rooms to get to the next bonfire, with just 5 enemies spread throughout them and what is essentially 2 encounters. I fought worse odds on my journey, or so I thought. 3 red-eyed knights and 2 priests stopped me dead in my tracks more than anything I had encountered thus far. In the end, I didn't even kill them. I ran past them to touch the next bonfire and, well, I didn't let them kill me, so much as I tried in vain to fight them, but died an inevitable death, respawning at the new bonfire past them. And things only got worse from there. The next area literally started raining enemies around me. Honestly, it was the first time in Dark Souls 3 that I felt the pure frustration and weariness I felt while playing Dark Souls 1, as the game pulled every cheap trick it could, seeming to taunt me with glee at yet another death. I decided to take the Captain America approach and push on.
I can do this all day.
But I was worried that the game had turned, and the rest of the experience was going to be like this. Spoiler alert, it wasn't, thank fuck. Once I eventually made it past Lothric Castle, thanks to a combination of luck, level grinding, swearing, and almost breaking my controller in half, the Dragon Slayer armor fight was excellent, and Grand Archives returned me to the same feelings I had before I reached this accursed place. I know I spent a bit of time there banging on about how frustrating a single area of the game made me feel, but I felt it was important to acknowledge that, while I was really satisfied with the learning curve and escalation of difficulty in Dark Souls 3, how much Lothric Castle almost destroyed my soul. Plus it's good sometimes to vent and get things off your chest. Like how this one dickhead chucking that white crap that prevents me from healing caused me more bother than most of the bosses in the game. But then, like I always say, difficulty is subjective. Maybe Lothric Castle isn't such a universal sticking point for people. Maybe all my weaknesses just happen to line up for that one area. I mean, I am the weirdo who actually likes Faring Keep. Wow, that chapter was way longer than I intended it to be. Look at that, I'm going to follow it up with this chapter, one which will undoubtedly be shorter, but one that unpacks a vital part of what makes Dark Souls 3, and Soulsborne games in general, so immersive. Something that never really occurred to me until someone actually said it out loud while I was playing Dark Souls 3 is that Soulsborne games don't have music, outside of boss fights and the quote-unquote safe areas like the Firelink Shrine. Even if you're not consciously aware of it, this design has two very strong effects on the game. The first is that it makes any time you do hear music extremely impactful. One of the things the Soulsborne games are best known for, amongst a sea of really great things they're known for, is having fantastic soundtracks. I still listen to the Bloodborne soundtrack fairly regularly on Spotify. It's incredible music in its own right, with really strong and diverse themes for each of its bosses and a hauntingly beautiful melody for the Hunter's Dream. Sorry, I slipped into Bloodborne mode for a second there. Dark Souls 3 is the same. Some of its boss fight music is transcendent. The themes for the Soul of Cinder fight or the Twin Princes fight are amazing. The Firelink Shrine theme so perfectly captures the atmosphere of the world and the story in general. Both of them, depending on what ending you're pursuing. But there's another effect. The boss fights serve as the most epic moments of your journey, and the use of such excellent music elevates these moments to their rightful place, as the most badass, memorable encounters in the game. And as I mentioned before, Firelink Shrine's music is haunting and perfectly captures the atmosphere of the entire game. I half expected to round a corner at one point and find a bard actually playing the theme somewhere. It wouldn't have been out of place if someone was actually playing the tune in the world itself. And because these are the only times you hear music, it deepens your immersion in the rest of the world. By eschewing the use of music elsewhere, Dark Souls 3 and Soulsborne games in general gets out of its own way and lets the world speak for itself. Setting aside the fact that being able to hear enemies' movements is crucial to your survival when you're exploring, and has in fact saved my life dozens of times over, the world comes to life around you. There's nothing between you and the wider world of Lothric. I mean, it does help that Dark Souls 3 has incredible sound design. From the various wails, shrieks, moans, cries, and whatever other synonyms you can think of to describe the various noises the enemies make, to the satisfying squelch the weapons make when they make contact with your adversaries, or the howl of the wind atop Lothric Castle, or the bubbling nightmare of Faring Keep, right down to the small details like the sound of a bonfire coming to life, or the crunch of the ground beneath your feet, or the fucking heart attack that this moment gave me. Bloodborne is a masterclass in this, Dark Souls 3 is exceptionally good at it, and both games use sound and music to amazing effect, bringing the world to life around you in a way that very few other RPGs, or games in general, manage to achieve. I'm going to drop 2 spoiler warnings here. In this chapter, I'm going to be spending some time talking about the combat mechanics, which is going to involve talking in detail about some of Dark Souls 3's boss fights. When talking about a game like this, boss spoilers can be just as heavy as story spoilers, so if you haven't played Dark Souls 3 yet and are planning on doing so without knowing what titanic boss fights await you, you're probably going to want to bail right about now. If you're not bothered about that, but you are bothered about story spoilers, then this chapter is safe. It'll be the next chapter where I dive into talking about some of the story specifics. So I talked a lot about combat in my Bloodborne video, and while there is a lot of difference between that game and this one, both games have a similar sort of feeling. So I don't want to dive too deeply into the minutiae of how the combat mechanics work or how they feel, because I don't want to repeat myself too much. Combat in Soulsborne titles has a very specific feel, one that's not been replicated in too many other games. Even Souls-likes don't tend to bring that same feeling into their own games. The better ones, like Neo, do their own thing when it comes to fighting. There's a physicality to combat in Dark Souls 3 and its forebears. Every single push of a button is incredibly meaningful, not least of all because there's no way to cancel a move once you've activated. Swing a weapon, chug an Estus, dodge, block, parry. Once you push a button to do anything, you're committed to doing that thing, whether it was a good idea or not. It makes Dark Souls 3's combat feel almost like a puzzle. You have to learn and anticipate what your enemy is going to do, or at the very least what they're capable of, and react accordingly. And you also need to do the same of yourself. It's not enough to wait for an opening or create your own and swing your weapon. It's not enough to see an attack coming and dodge, block, or parry it. You have to have a certain mastery over what you're capable of. And I'm not talking about your own personal gaming skills or getting good or anything like that. I'm talking on a more basic, fundamental level within the gameplay itself. You have to learn, on an instinctual level, everything about your player character. The moveset of your chosen weapon, the speed that you can unleash attacks, how long it takes for you to drink an Estus flask, how far you can roll, how quickly you can raise that shield, how many times you can swing your weapon, and so much more. It sounds like a lot. It sounds daunting. And in theory, it kind of is. I was certainly daunted the first time I loaded up both of the Soulsborne games I've completed. That's what makes the onboarding I talked about in an earlier chapter so crucial for a game like Dark Souls 3 to get right. By the time you've reached the end of the high wall and beaten Vought, you'll have a grasp on everything I just mentioned. Enough to get you through. And somewhere along your journey, and I can't tell you when because A, it's different for everyone, and B, I can't actually consciously remember it when it happened to me, it all becomes instinct. One thing I actually learned in Bloodborne, and relearned fairly quickly in Dark Souls 3, is that the green bar is actually a lot more important than the red bar. Don't get me wrong, your health isn't unimportant. Lose it all and you're back to the previous bonfire minus your souls, and with all the enemies having respawned between you and wherever you left them. But unless you're backtracking through previous areas to complete side quests or search for items or something, all of the enemies you face, from the smallest looking minion to the imposing knights to the initially intimidating bosses, are going to be able to wreck your health bar in pretty short order. Protecting that red bar is crucial, and the way you do that is by not getting hit. Whether you're dodging or blocking, it's your stamina bar that holds the key to this. And at a certain point, you just stop needing to even look at it. The switch flips, beast mode is activated, you become one with your character, however you want to characterize it. Somewhere in your journey through Lothric and beyond, you stop needing to check your stamina bar to see how much you have left. Because you just know. You know how many dodges you have, or how many hits you can block, or how many times you can swing your weapon. The same thing happens to your health bar, to a certain extent. There are plenty of times I've taken some bad hits and created space to heal myself. It's a core mechanic of Dark Souls 3, and I'd have to be utterly mental to suggest you don't need to heal. But like stamina management, at a certain point health management becomes instinctive. You stop checking your health bar to see how much health you have and make a decision to heal. Unless you've had your shit completely wrecked, like this. Instead, you keep the fight up. Healing becomes something you do when you either see or create an opening for it, instead of being something you actively pursue if you notice your health has become low. In my final fight with the Soul of Cinder, which I watched back a couple of times because I sent an unlisted YouTube clip of it to some friends, my healing almost looked a little irrational. I'd fight on with low health, or heal when my health bar was relatively full. It's because I was healing when I had the chance. It turns out offense really is the best form of defense. Even in a Souls game. I think it's this instinctive rhythm combined with the physicality of the combat and the meaningfulness of every button push that makes fights in Dark Souls 3 so intense and so exhilarating. At the end of the Soul of Cinder fight, right here, I don't do anything for quite a while. I was shocked that I'd managed to pull that fight off. I mean, I forgot the ember for Christ's sake. I dropped my controller on my desk and my hands were shaking. I've had some good fights in my time playing video games. Not many of them have left me feeling such a surge of adrenaline. During my stream of Dark Souls 1, Foxes and I got into talking about Bloodborne. It happens a lot. We started talking about the great fights in that game. Martyr Ligarius, Father Gascoigne, and the like. I have a fortnightly podcast where I review or give impressions of the games I'm playing, and I do these retrospectives, and I naturally talk about a lot of specific moments in games that I love. But I don't think there's any other games, aside from Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne, where I talk about individual fights like this. I love exploring Dark Souls 3, I love doing the side quests, I love finding new areas and seeing what the game could possibly have in store for me next. But the boss fights truly are the epic standouts of the entire experience. Sure, I have funny moments or badass moments that I can think back on that have nothing to do with fighting bosses. But when I talk to foxes about this game, or anyone else who's a fan, it'll be the boss fights that come up first, and come up most frequently. And for a few different reasons, too. The most obvious one is mechanics. There are some bosses in Dark Souls 3 that are just a joy to learn and put yourself against. Like the Dancer of the Boreal Valley, which aside from being a mechanically satisfying boss to fight, attacks in a 3/4 rhythm, making a fight feel like you're actually in an incredibly deadly dance. On Champion Gundyr, one of the most relentless boss fights in the game, a boss who barely lets up. Like, you've really got to be on your toes during this fight at all times, and he's a dirty fighter. Even if you manage to get behind him, he'll back kick you in the face like an absolute piece of shit. Sorry. I think I might have some unresolved rage issues over the Champion Gundyr fight. Some of the boss fights are memorable for the spectacle. The Deacons of the Deep, while being a fight I didn't particularly enjoy, is still pretty cool. An entire congregation of clerics defending the tomb of Aldrich, who you later also get to fight. Or how about halfway through the fight with the Curse-Rotted Greatwood, when it literally smashes the ground and sends you both tumbling into the pit below? And then there's the Abyss Watchers who... Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's for the next chapter. Look, suffice to say, I think the combat in Dark Souls 3 feels pretty amazing, and the boss fights are a huge reason behind that. I even ranked them, for no other reason than I felt like it. I've put the ranking up on the screen for you, pause to read it if you like, because we're off to the next chapter. Fair warning, this is where the story spoilers are going to start kicking in. In Dark Souls 3, the world is doomed. No one really says it out loud too much. I mean, you kind of get the gist of the current apocalypse and how you can definitely prevent it if you collect the ashes of the 5 Cinder Lords and relink the fire. But there's something unspoken hanging in the air that even if you manage to do that, the world is probably still screwed. It's a pervasive feeling, one that colours all of the interactions you have with pretty much all of the characters, even if the topics of your own personal mission or the state of the world in general rarely actually comes up. The world is boned, we're all fucked, but why talk about it? Kind of reminds me of real life a bit. It really doesn't feel like what you're doing is going to make that much of a difference. And the more you explore and see and learn about the world of Lothric, the more a single thought might cross your mind. Is there anything in this world even worth saving? Lothric definitely feels like it might be past the point of no return, and all that's left are the echoes of a once great place, now overtaken by demons and monsters that wander the land, only a precious few left who haven't lost their minds. And those few have all but accepted the inevitable. The souls you meet on your journey, the ones who aren't trying to kill you, are by and large on their own personal missions. One last great purposeful journey before they succumb to their inevitable fate. Okay, so when I played Bloodborne, I didn't really get a whole lot of the story. I just enjoyed the spectacle, the environments, and the world itself. And the same is mostly true of Dark Souls 3. There's definitely a much simpler main narrative thread you can follow. World screwed, get ashes, save world. I know that's highly reductive, and that there's a ton of lore that can really deepen your experience of the story that's playing out, and I really appreciated it. The boss fight against the Abyss Watchers is made all the more poignant if you learn the backstory of the Watchers themselves. When you enter their arena, you find them fighting and killing each other before turning to you, the interloper, on their very private slaughter. It's a really fun fight. In the first phase, you have to manage fighting against 3 enemies who attack you and even each other, before the second phase pits you against one beefed up Watcher. The intro cutscene is cool, the fight itself is challenging and mechanically very satisfying, and beating them releases some of that sweet, sweet dopamine. Learn their backstory and the fight becomes a little bit tragic. The Abyss Watchers were once part of the Undead Legion, and we learn from Hawkwood that they were sworn to hold back the Abyss, hence the name, even going so far as to destroy entire kingdoms at the slightest sign of exposure. They even linked the Flame in an earlier cycle, though they were betrayed by the fire and the power they drew on to fight the Abyss evaporated. Now Farron has been overrun by Dark Wraiths and other monstrosities while they stay camped at the edge of the catacombs of Karthus, taken by the Abyss they once fought. Probably by High Lord Waldnir, another boss who will actually pull you into the Abyss briefly when you get to the other side of the catacombs. And the Watchers kill each other over and over in a reflex of their former mission. So that last part is kind of speculation. Because Dark Souls 3 is great at setting up some great lore, but leaving a lot open to interpretation, or trusting its players to be able to fill in the story themselves with the information they're given. Once I finish making this video, I'll be popping over to VardyVidya to watch their lore vids on Dark Souls 3, but for now, everything I said about the Abyss Watchers is what I've managed to come up with myself based on the lore and context clues in the game. It's a mode of storytelling I always find really fascinating. I've talked before about games that have an exposition problem. You find this a lot in RPGs, where the exposition is overwritten and thrown at you in huge chunks, and where conversations with characters can feel really clunky or unnatural because someone you've just met is explaining in great detail to a stranger the history and culture of their entire race. I like to call this the Mass Effect problem. Dark Souls 3 does the opposite. It gives you just enough to let you piece the rest together. It's great, even if some of the characters are overwritten when talking in ye olde English. But for me, Dark Souls 3 does its best storytelling with its characters. A lot of the time when people were trying to explain the world or its lore to me, it was interesting, but at the same time I was kind of having this reaction.
Sun nuggets, solar babies, La Uva Loca, California's finest, all for you to smoke out.
I like your funny words, Magic Man.
Instead, I really enjoyed Dark Souls 3 as a character-driven adventure. As I mentioned earlier, the world is screwed and most of the characters are finishing up their personal business as things wind down, and many of their stories are tragically compelling. This even extends to some of the bosses you'll fight. Mind you, Souls games have always been pretty good at making you feel bad for killing some of its bosses. Oh, hello, footage of Maiden Astray and Demon Souls. How did you get in the edit? Most of the characters you meet and help, should you actually choose to help them, come to a bad end. Usually death. But their individual stories are really quite poignant if you follow along with them. I relished finding the next steps of their quests, helping them achieve their goals as the world dies, or simply just finding and getting to chat with them. Helping Cirrus, for example, tells a really bittersweet tale. You first meet her in the Firelink Shrine, where she eventually realizes that you're both duty-bound, and places some trust in you have to hear more about you, presumably from the other inhabitants at the shrine. After you save her from an assault by one of Rosaria's fingers, an assassin, not an actual finger. It's Dark Souls. I feel like I need to make that distinction. She can be summoned to help you fight a couple of bosses. She leaves a special budding green blossom with the shrine handmaid, who is most likely her grandmother, and sets off to the Pit of Hollows to confront her grandfather, Holy Knight Hodrick, who has gone mad. After you help her kill Hodrick, she expresses gratitude that her grandfather can now rest in peace, and that she herself is ready to die. But first, she swears fealty to you, recognizing that she can help you with your G, just as you helped with hers. You can summon her for another couple of late-game boss fights, including against the Twin Princes, which is the last time you can call on her for help. When I fought the Twin Princes, I summoned her, and she died during the fight. Afterwards, I visited her grandfather's grave outside the Firelink Shrine, and found her body lying nearby. Now, that last part would have happened after I beat the Twin Princes, irregardless of whether I summoned her or if she'd even lived through the fight. But I like the poetry of it. She completes her own personal quest, her grandfather can rest in peace, and she fulfills her duty to me by ensuring I can defeat the final Lord of Cinder, and then she too can rest in peace. That's one example, and probably one of the better ones. But there are a lot of brilliantly understated character stories you can find throughout Dark Souls 3. Helping Anri and Horace on their quest to kill Aldrich, rescuing Irina of Karim and giving her a new purpose, rescuing Greyrat and forging an unlikely friendship with him. I'm a sucker for heartfelt declarations of unlikely friendship. Bonding with Orbeck and learning his history as you both learn sorcery together, and loads more. If you paused the video during the last chapter to read my Dark Souls 3 boss rankings, you'll have noticed that I put Yhorm in the top 5, with a note in brackets that read, "For the Fields." It's not a particularly great boss fight, all things considered, but it does have an incredibly strong emotional impact if you bring a friend, Sigurd of Katarina. A knight you've helped out a couple of times, a shining beacon in the dreary world of Lothric, and like the best character in the game. If you help him reach the profane capital, he'll join you in fighting Yhorm to fulfill an old promise to his friend. And then he'll sit down, have a final toast, and a nap. Character stories are what drove my enjoyment in Dark Souls 3's story. The overarching narrative was cool and all, and some of the spectacle was amazing, but what really engaged me was following along with these deeply personal, often bittersweet stories of a small band of people doing their best as the world literally fell apart around them. You can make different choices in most of these stories, or refuse outright to help these people. You might even wonder what the point of helping them is, since the world is dying and most of their personal questlines end in their deaths. It harkens back to one of my favourite lines in Angel, and rather than mangle it here, I'll just roll the clip. Future Amy, just roll the clip.
If there's no great glorious end to all this, if nothing we do matters, then all that matters is what we do. Because that's all there is. What we do now, today. Because if there's no bigger meaning than the smallest act of kindness, it's the greatest thing in the world.
My only gripe with all of this is how fucking impossible it would have been to find all of this stuff if I wasn't following a spoiler-free guide, letting me know exactly where to go to find characters or progress questlines. While exploration is highly encouraged in Dark Souls 3, to continue questlines you need to frequently revisit areas you otherwise have no business revisiting. At one point, Sigurd finds himself trapped down a well, and you need to find him his armor to get him out, although I'm not sure why heavy armor would help him get out of a well. The well in question is one you run past without a second thought earlier in the game. In fact, it's entirely possible you didn't even see it to begin with. You have absolutely no reason to go back to the place this well is. There's exactly one item in the area, and it's really obvious, and you definitely picked it up on your first visit. Most questlines are similar, as are the rewards for defeating NPC invaders, which you'll find in the most illogical of places. While I was well prepared for this thanks to my guide, if I had been playing without one, I would have missed quite a lot of what turned out to be some of my favourite parts of the game, thanks to Dark Souls 3's needlessly esoteric design. Which would have been an incredible shame, because then Sigurd would have been stuck down the well forever, and I never would have been able to help him fulfill his promise to his old friend.
Well, I'm going to have myself a little nap. The only thing to do, really, after a nice toast. You are a true friend. Best of luck with your duty.
You know, I honestly don't even know why I put these stupid conclusion chapters in these videos. What a way to start this chapter. I guess they're for summarizing the points of the video in a more succinct form. Too long didn't read, but with pictures, I guess too long didn't watch. But I'm assuming if you made it far enough into this video to be hearing this, then you already heard all of the points anyway, so I don't know why this is here. Here's a conclusion. Dark Souls 3 is great and I loved it a lot. You should play it. Even though I just spoiled a bunch of it in the last two chapters, you should still play it. And you know what? If you're interested in giving it a look, but you can't because of a lack of accessibility options or the lack of an easy mode, you can always get the game on PC and download a trainer and make your own accessibility options, like giving yourself unlimited stamina or health, or even use it to pump up all of your skills to 99 and get some much needed catharsis against some enemies that frustrated the fucking shit out of you in the first run. Just play the game in offline mode if you're going to do that. And don't take the character online at all. PvP has enough of a problem with cheaters. But otherwise, have fun. Dark Souls 3 is a really brilliant game. Alright, so before I get to ranking Dark Souls 3, I want to give some shout-outs, the customary shout-outs. Thanks to Moody for checking this video out ahead of time and giving me feedback, as always. Thanks to Foxes for recommending I give Dark Souls 3 a try, and nerding out with me about Souls 1 games in general. I don't think I would have played them at all if it wasn't for you, so I'm doing heart hands, you can't see them. Thanks to Amy, not me, for listening to me rant on about the game when I started kicking my teeth in, and I guess special thanks to the wiki writers and Reddit posters that helped me see everything I wanted to see in this game. I couldn't have done it without you. For real. Okay, so on to the ranking. So I was originally going to put Dark Souls 3 here. I think it's a fantastic game. that I had a great time with, and the only thing holding it back is the extreme spike in difficulty in Lothric Castle. But then I remembered that Pickle Pea Pumperum exists.
You. Me, Pickled Pea. Me, Bumperum.
So it's going here. Yes, that's how easily swayed I am by the things I love, and honestly, how arbitrary this list really is. But while I'm here, so I've been thinking a lot about Bloodborne recently and how much of a masterpiece it is. So I'm going to make one more change to this list, and I'm going to put Bloodborne back up here. This doesn't mean I love Control any less, more that I've just had a lot of time to reflect on how deeply I love Bloodborne, and I was looking at this list when I added Dark Souls 1 to it, and it didn't sit right with me. I promise I won't make changes to the list too much going forward. In fact, I'm hoping this is the only one. Anyway, I have to run. I'm currently in the process of editing the first Mass Effect Roundtable Retrospective video, which should hopefully be out soon. And I haven't forgotten about the Dishonored video. It's still in the works. It's just taking longer than I anticipated. Video games are like crazy good right now. Okay, I'm off. For real this time. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching this video. Have a wonderful day.